do you remember what you were doing in August of 2012? You were all about 10 years old, probably enjoying your summer, getting ready for another year of school. There were a lot of questions you had at the time about what was going to happen in the next few years. But at the time, I'm sure that high school still seemed like a million miles away. Which leads me to this picture I've got up on the screen. You're probably wondering what the heck it is. There's just a little tiny dot in the middle of the screen. Pretty insignificant, you would probably say. It looks like a speck of dust, maybe on a table, or stuck to a window, or maybe it's just a trick of the light. But the reality is it's none of those things. In fact, it's a whole lot more. You see, the story that I'm referring to here that ends, or rather becomes extremely significant in August of 2012 actually began on September 5th, 1977. For you space nerds out there, you might have an idea of where I'm going here. Because on that day, humanity launched the Voyager 1 space probe. The point of this device, its mission, was that we had reached a point where the planets were aligning in such a way that an object using gravity assist would be able to visit all four of the major gas giants in our solar system, starting with Jupiter, then on to Saturn, then on to Uranus, and finally Neptune. And that was a pretty big deal scientifically because we could get a lot of data that we otherwise would never have access to. But what really made this particular mission special is that because it was going to be accelerating by grabbing a little bit of velocity from these gravity assists from all four of these huge gas giants, Voyager would reach a speed that was possible for it to escape the sun's gravity. Which leads us to August of 2012, when Voyager became the first ever human-made object to leave our solar system. As a result, it became the first thing that we ever built that actually made it out into interstellar space. Well, why is this significant? Well, if you know the story of the Golden Record, the answer is kind of right there. I'll maybe talk about it a little bit more in another video, but the gist of the matter is essentially this. The Golden Record includes some really important stuff. Because we knew it would be the first thing that we'd send out into interstellar space, and that it would never be returning to our solar system, this vehicle became like a record, like a time capsule for our entire civilization, our entire species maybe. If Earth was destroyed tomorrow, that vehicle would still be out there, and presumably someday a sufficiently advanced civilization might find it, and they would have insight into who we were. So on this record, recorded in every major language, is a greeting, so that they could discover that we had many different languages. There's also a map to Earth using the local pulsars in the area, because we figured that would be a useful navigational technique. But I think the coolest thing is that there is music recorded on there as well. And even an MRI scan of a scientist experiencing different human emotions. So they, for instance, had her experience joy and confusion and hate, but the last thing that they had her record was the brain scan for what it feels like to fall in love. And these are all such profoundly human things. So, coming back to this opening picture, what the heck is it? Well, you probably have a few theories by this point, but I think the answer is actually the most profoundly human thing we could have possibly done. During the 1980s, as this probe reached the edge of the solar system, it was beginning to lose power. It was powered through these big solar panels stuck to the side, but the further it gets from the sun, the less energy it's able to gather from it. And NASA knew that there was only a few maybe simple actions that it could take before it was completely dead. And so they had to decide, given that this probe was as far out as it was, what they would use that last ounce of power for before the whole thing shut down. And they had a couple options. They could take a picture of maybe one of the gas giants, which it had already kind of done. It could maybe take a picture of some objects. Maybe they could find something out in the Oort cloud, which is at the edge of the solar system. But they decided that none of that was quite good enough. A man named Carl Sagan, one of the people who helped set up the entire mission, he actually came up with an idea that the minute he said it, it captured the imagination of everyone. He said, why don't we use the last of its power to, instead of looking out, let's turn it around and let's look back at Earth. So this picture you see on the screen in front of you here is a famous picture called the pale blue dot, and it is a picture of Earth from the edge of the solar system. And what's important to notice is that on that little dot, every empire that has ever risen and fallen, every king, every triumph, every tragedy, every atrocity, every heroic act, every poem ever written, every relationship that has ever begun, everything human has all happened on that tiny little pixel in the middle of your screen. And it kind of really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It really is quite magnificent. And I think it really ties in with our whole topic of enlightenment. It really does, doesn't it? Because it was only at the end of its journey, after it had visited all the things it was supposed to visit and reached a distance that was so far away from where it had started, could it really look back and see just how small Earth really is and how small we really are. There's a Tennyson quote, I'll probably misquote it here a little bit, that says, only after traveling can you return to where you started and know it for the first time. All of these quotes and all of these ideas are very much in this vein of enlightenment. And that's why it brings us to our final major project for this course. And I think more importantly, it is the final project you will ever do for English language arts as part of your public school career. All these years, 12 years, has all led to this. You are weeks away from finishing, and this is our last major assignment that you guys will complete. And that's why I chose to talk at the beginning here about a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is space. Not just because of the technological side of it, but because of what it sometimes shows us about who we are as humans. I find it strikingly beautiful that we use the last ounces of this probe's power to turn it around to take a picture of Earth so that we could see just how small we are and how far we still have to go in terms of our voyages of discovery. And that is right in line with the sort of things that Plato was talking about getting out of the cave and seeing the world as it truly is. We think we're so important, and we are, but when you look at that little pale blue dot, you kind of can't help but realize maybe we are not as important as we think we are. Now, is that something that's meant to make you feel sad? No, not at all. I think it's the opposite. It's actually quite freeing. It's liberating to discover that, if we're that small, it really is up to us to make sure that our lives mean something and that the way that we exist actually adds up to something that matters. And the only person who can really figure that out is you, and that's kind of cool. So what is this final project? Well, you've probably got a little bit of a sense of it here. Let me just bring it up here. It is your Enlightenment project. I really, really, really wish that we could do this in class together because it is my favorite part of the course. It's actually one of the reasons why I like the job as much as I do. There's a lot of reasons, but this particular one with grade 12s is really something special because I want to give you the chance at the end of your school career to do an assignment, to do a project about something that really gets you fired up. And of course, you can probably tell I'm a little fired up about space. You may have heard me tell a story or two over the years. So what is this thing? Well, basically, I'll kind of go through this step by step, and of course it'll be in your OneNote, but you're going to choose a topic that you are passionate about. Not something you think I want to hear about, not something you think will impress me, although it never hurts, but what is something that you really care about, that you are fired up about, that you either already know a significant amount about, or you would be curious to know more about. Then there's a couple steps below here, which you can go through kind of individually, but they're like a bit of a brainstorming process. There's this intellectual speed dating here. It talks about, working with a partner. You obviously have to do that virtually, but try to have a conversation about it. For instance, you may have noticed that my little speech about Voyager here at the start was not exactly crisp, and that's because it was first try. I purposely made sure, no editing, no planning, other than just making sure I knew my facts, right? Because it was something that I could talk about. I think I went for about 6 minutes there without having any issues because it's something I'm really interested in. And so it was easy to talk about. So the whole point of this part 2 is I want you to be able to try it out. Talk about something that you are interested enough. And if you can't talk about it for 5 minutes, you probably aren't that interested in it. So maybe it's time to adjust to a different topic there. Next up is free writing. After you've kind of gone through that and you've looked at these objectives, like informing the class, entertaining the group, and this last one I think is really important because we've talked about this in the past about being a good communicator is helping to make your audience feel something. So keep that in mind. So as you're free writing, you can write about anything with your topic. You can talk about the information you know about it. You can talk about what you'd like to know more about and the questions that you have. And you can also muse about the different strategies you might use to create a reaction, an emotional reaction from your viewer. That whole point there is just to give me a little bit of insight into how you're thinking about this project. And the reason it's free writing, and you'll see here, spelling doesn't count, organization, grammar, none of that matters. It's all ideas. I just want you to get a chance to get it down on paper, or in this case, virtually, what you're excited about and what you'd like to do your project about. I also, one of the other reasons I wish we were in the classroom is because I have exemplars that, of course, I've saved on my work computer that I don't have access to right now, but I've seen students do video documentaries. I've seen students make these, you remember like the RSA Animate ones where they have done with a whiteboard and they've drawn out everything that they're talking about. There are lots of different ways to do this. You just have to keep in mind that it has to be something that could be shown to a classmate, or ideally even to the entire class, that would cause them to know more about the issue that you're talking about and feel something, because you're not going to get anyone to pay attention to you and you're not going to change any minds in the real world unless you can make people feel something. So that's what I want you to keep in mind here. So now, after looking at those steps, oops, I've misnumbered here. Let me just fix that. Step 3, this one's a little bit unusual. It says, go watch a Dead Poets Society. This is another one I wish that we could have watched together as a class, but such is life. You'd need to go watch it because it's really the final piece of this whole Enlightenment project. So think of that one almost as an assignment. Go, I don't know if it's on Netflix, but I'm sure you crafty internet people can probably find it somewhere. The whole movie is Enlightenment. There are a lot of different references that it makes to Plato's The Cave. There's literally even a cave in it, and the characters have to go to it. And the whole movie is about living in a time and a place where these boys, which are the focus of the film, feel like they have to live a certain way because that's the way that society tells them they're supposed to live. These ambitions for their future are like inherited. They didn't choose any of them, and they're eventually kind of given this opportunity to think outside that framework, and they start to ask big questions and they start to do big things. But just like we learned in our study of the cave, enlightenment isn't always a positive thing in terms of how things work out. And so the movie is quite tragic, but it's also kind of beautiful in that way. Just like Voyager went outside the solar system and it died, but it gave us new insight that we couldn't have otherwise understood. So the whole movie is about opening your eyes even if it hurts you to see the light. So after you've watched that, now you go on to step 4, and you're going to take a look at this Enlightenment rubric, which is over here. So this is a major assignment, and as you know, based on the rules from the province, your grade cannot go down after the April report card there, but it can go up. And this is an assignment that if you do a really good job on it, which let's be honest, the grade for this tends to be pretty good because students always do good work when they get to talk about something they're passionate about. And considering you get to try and create something that is maybe a little bit unique, usually it goes pretty well. I've literally had tears in my eyes at some of these presentations. So see what you can do. It could be a vlog, like I guess a mini one like I did here, or it can be more, carefully produced like a documentary, or any other medium you can think of. I don't want to give you too many suggestions because I think that you guys have an opportunity to be creative here, and I'm interested to see what you come up with. Anyways, it's the same for categories that we use to mark all of your major projects, and it's actually the same for that they would use to mark your extended written response on the provincial exam, which you guys got out of because of this whole COVID thing. Lucky you. Lucky me too, because marking it is painful. The only real difference is that instead of writing mechanics on the last one, it's presentation mechanics. So take a look at this on your own, but it's kind of the same thing. Be insightful, be organized, use some soaring rhetorical language or humorous language, and put together a presentation that's got some production value to it. So that'll be step 4. Step 5, you can watch my really awesome exemplar video here. I made this actually a while back as part of a using technology in the classroom sort of thing, and I was trying to teach people about how difficult it would be to travel to Mars. Surprise, right, with the whole space thing here. And so I made this video, and I knew that my audience would be my fellow teachers that were part of this group. And so that included Mr. Funk, Mr. Ran, Miss Douglas, Mr. Shimoji, and a few others. So I included them in the video, but as these little aliens that are the characters. And really, I just took things that I'm interested in, which is space and video games, because I'm a nerd. I mean, I'm literally in a pretend underground bunker here. And so I used this game called Kerbal Space Program to try and teach my audience about how hard it would be to actually get a colony onto Mars. But I also did some research to find out what it would look like in the real world. And the cool thing is the game actually really accurately represents the physics and some of the challenges that would be part of that process. So in making this video, I got to talk about something I was interested in. I got to develop my video editing skills, and it was actually kind of fun to make. And I'm pretty happy with the way that it came together. So take a look at that if you like. It's about 10 minutes long or something. And it kind of shows maybe another option of what you could do for your own version of this. And finally, the last step, step 7, make a project that achieves the following objective. And I don't like to read off of the screen, but I will for this because this is really the crux of the assignment. Create an original informative piece, informative, right, the key word, that is both entertaining and informs your class about an issue or interest that you think is important. This is actually very similar to the question you would have gotten on your provincial exam if our topic had been something like Enlightenment. So this issue can be something that you already know a lot about, or it can be something personal that helps your audience to better understand you as an individual. So you can choose to tell us about you. You can enlighten us about an important issue, or you can enlighten us about you as a human being. This is kind of a cool thing to do at this point in your lives. You're about to end your grade 12, you're about to move on to university or a career, or who knows what you have in your future, but that next step is just around the corner. So what better time than right now to turn around and look back at that pale blue dot and find out what you can see now that you're that far away from where you started. And you can really know who you are maybe for the first time. Your piece has to be entertaining, and it has to be informative. So I really want you to think carefully about how you would create something that can do that. This is going to be the focus for pretty much the rest of we've got about 3.5 weeks remaining. So I'm going to make sure that if we do anything else beyond this, it will be simple and day-long stuff so that you can use most of your time towards this. Excuse me. Because I really am excited to see what you guys can come up for this piece there. So take a good look at all this. Hopefully this video, I'm going to try and wrap it up here because I can see I'm getting on towards 20 minutes, but it really is important that whatever you decide to work on, you choose something that you get fired up over. I want your last project to be something you care about, and I want you to show us who you really are and what you can do. And this project is the best way to do that, and it's the best part of the course, and it kind of is a culmination of all the things that you've learned about how to make a good, effective communication piece. So yeah, if you got questions, don't hesitate to email me, but keep an eye out in your OneNote as well. I'll probably add some inspiration stuff here, a few clips from TV shows and speeches and other things like that might give you some ideas. But think about the emotion you want to generate in your audience. Do you want to make them happy? Do you want to make them cry? Do you want to make them have some goosebumps? And then look at examples of how others have done that to you and steal it and use it for yourself. 100%. That's what you got to do. Either way, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys get up with here or come up with here. And yeah, questions, you know where my email is. Otherwise, I'll keep an eye on your OneNotes. I'm excited to see what you do. Have a good one, guys. Take care.